Rain crashes against the ballroom windows like a warning from the sky. Lydia Hart stands in the center of glittering wealth, a charity gala filled with people who pretend to care. Her thrift store gown clings to her skin, soaked from the storm she just escaped. She shouldn't be here, and everyone knows it. Elise, her wealthy stepsister, circles like a predator. Elise, loudly, "Did the catering staff run out of uniforms, Lydia?" Laughter erupts, sharp, merciless. Lydia's heart pounds against old wounds she swore she'd buried. Then she sees him, Daniel, the ex who threw her away the moment Elise opened her wallet. Daniel, still obsessed with me? You should be grateful someone once loved you. Her humiliation ignites into reckless fire. Lydia, I'm actually dating someone. Someone way out of your league. The room hushes. Elise. Who? A farmer. Lydia's breath shakes. Her eyes lock onto a stranger, tall, cold, magnetic, watching from the shadows. Lydia. Him. The billionaire CEO rises and walks toward her. Since the creation of this channel, there have been long nights, quiet uploads, moments of doubt, and flashes of hope. Through it all, you've been there, the ones who show up, stay till the end, and keep this channel alive even when I question what keeps me going. This isn't a big channel. It's never been about going viral. It's about connection. A bond between a faceless creator and a community that still sees the person behind the silence. To my viewers in the United States, Trinidad and Tobago, Nigeria, the United Kingdom, and Canada, your loyalty, strength, and spirit have built the foundation of this channel. Every view, comment, and share is a heartbeat in this story we're building together. You didn't just keep the channel alive, you kept me alive too. With all my heart, thank you. The Glided Heart Stories creator. Let us now begin our story. Morning light crawled through the thin curtains of Lydia Hart's cramped apartment, painting pale gold across cracked walls. The rain hadn't stopped. It murmured softly against the windowpane as if trying to wash away the chaos of the night before. Her phone screen was a battlefield of notifications. Every headline screamed her name. Who is Lydia Hart? Mysterious woman claims billionaire Liam Crane as her boyfriend. Some posts zoomed in on her startled face. Others captured the moment Liam Crane, the city's most powerful and untouchable man, had quietly risen from his seat and confirmed her reckless claim. She'd barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the flash of cameras, heard the echo of laughter she tried to silence with one impulsive lie. And now that lie was spreading faster than the rain outside. A knock broke through her thoughts. Firm, rhythmic, unyielding. Lydia hesitated, her pulse quickening. When she opened the door, two men in dark coats stood on the landing, their expressions unreadable. "Miss Lydia Hart?" one asked. She nodded, unsure. "Mr. Crane requests your presence," the man said, handing her an embossed envelope. Immediately, her breath hitched. "Mr. Crane, as in?" "Liam Crane," the second man confirmed. "He'll explain everything." And before she could ask how or why, they were gone, leaving the scent of rain and polished leather in the hallway. Lydia looked down at the envelope. Heavy paper, gold insignia, the kind that didn't belong in her world. For a long moment, she simply stood there, the sound of rain louder than her thoughts. She should ignore it, pretend it never happened. But she couldn't. The truth was, she didn't have the luxury of ignoring anything anymore. Her small clinic for underprivileged children, the only thing she'd built after her mother's death, was drowning in debt. Every week, another eviction notice. Every night, another prayer for a miracle that never came. Maybe this wasn't a miracle, but it was something. The drive to the Crane estate felt like traveling between universes. Her old sneakers touched marble steps that reflected the morning light like glass. Guards stood like statues beside iron gates. The gardens were so perfectly trimmed they seemed unreal. As the car door opened, Lydia's hand brushed the silver locket at her throat, her mother's. She always touched it when fear tried to swallow her. Inside was a tiny photo, a reminder of a woman who had once told her, "Truth heals, but courage carries you there." Today, courage was all she had left. The butler led her through towering doors into a hall filled with portraits. men with proud eyes and women with poise carved from money and power. Every step she took echoed against marble floors, a sound that felt too loud, too human, for this place. And then she saw him. Liam Crane stood at the far end of the room, his silhouette framed by glass windows overlooking the city skyline. Even from across the distance, his presence commanded the air. Calm, precise, dangerous. When he spoke, his voice was steady but laced with something colder than anger. "You caused quite a scene last night." She flinched. "I didn't mean." He turned then, and the full weight of his gaze hit her like a spotlight. There was something disarming in his stillness, something that made her want to look away but couldn't. "You claimed me," he said, "in front of half the city. Why?" Lydia swallowed. "Because they were laughing at me. And I panicked." A long silence followed. Liam studied her, not the way people looked at other people, but the way a man reads a contract, searching for flaws. "Do you realize what that means?" he said finally. "My name, my company, my board, headlines, stock movement, reputation. You've set fire to all of it." She tried to meet his gaze. "Then I'll fix it. I'll tell the press it was a lie." "No," his voice was firm, almost sharp. "You won't." Lydia blinked. "What?" "My grandfather saw the footage," Liam said quietly. "For the first time in months," he smiled. "He believes you and I are together." He paused, watching the confusion spread across her face. "He's dying. And he's been begging to see me. Happy." She felt the weight of that word, dying, settle between them like something fragile. "So here's my offer," he continued. "Pretend to be my girlfriend for 1 week, until he stabilizes. After that, you'll be compensated." Her pride rose like a shield. "You think you can buy me?" "I think you need money," he replied, tone unwavering. "And I think you care more than you admit." She opened her mouth to protest, but stopped. Her mind flicked to her clinic, the cracked walls, the children waiting in hallways because there weren't enough beds. He saw the hesitation in her eyes and pressed. "If you refuse, your lie becomes a scandal. You'll drown in it before the day ends." Outside, thunder rolled faintly across the horizon, as though the world itself was warning her. Lydia exhaled slowly. 1 week, she said. Liam nodded once. "Our deal starts now." The next hours blurred like a dream she couldn't wake from. A team of stylists arrived, sweeping through her small life with the precision of an army. Her thrift store clothes were replaced with soft silk and tailored lines. Her hair, once simple and loose, was styled with practiced elegance. When she caught her reflection in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Later, cameras flashed as she stepped out of Liam's car. Reporters swarmed, shouting her name, asking questions about the secret romance. Liam's hand settled lightly on her back, a gesture that looked tender, but felt orchestrated. To the world, it looked like a fairy tale, Lydia thought. But to me, it felt like walking on glass. Dinner at the Crane mansion was worse than any nightmare she'd imagined. The room glittered with silver and crystal, but the warmth was all illusion. Liam's sister, Cassandra, studied her with the curiosity of someone inspecting a stain on her designer dress. "So, Lydia," Cassandra asked, smiling without warmth, "where did you two meet?" "One of Father's board meetings." "Something like that," Lydia replied carefully. "And what do you do?" "I run a free clinic for children." "How charitable," Cassandra murmured. Her voice dipped in venomous sweetness. The laughter that followed was quiet but cruel. Lydia felt the heat of humiliation climb up her throat, but before she could retreat into silence, Liam's voice cut through the air. "Enough, Cass." The room went still. Cassandra blinked, surprised. Liam's gaze stayed fixed on his plate, his tone steady but final. Lydia didn't look up, but for the first time, she felt something shift, a quiet crack in the walls of coldness he'd built around himself. Later that night, she found herself on the balcony overlooking the sleeping city. The wind played with her hair, and the lights below shimmered like scattered stars. She touched her mother's locket again, whispering, "I'm still trying, Mom. Even if it's a lie." Through the reflection in the glass door, she saw Liam standing behind her, watching, not with the eyes of a CEO assessing risk, but with something quieter. He didn't speak. Neither did she. But in that silence, something fragile began to grow, something neither of them would admit yet. Because sometimes, it wasn't the truth that brought people together. It was the lie that forced them to see each other clearly. The next morning, sunlight spilled over the glass corridors of the Crane estate like liquid gold. Lydia woke to silence, the kind of silence that felt expensive. It was the opposite of home. Back in her small town, mornings had been full of noise. Roosters, laughter from the market, her mother humming as she boiled herbs. Here, the air was still, polished, and lonely. A maid entered quietly, setting down a tray. "Mr. Crane is waiting for you in the East Garden," she said softly before disappearing. Lydia blinked at the breakfast. Croissants, fruit, fresh squeezed orange juice served in crystal. Everything gleamed, but she could barely taste it. She still wasn't sure why she'd said yes to all this, to pretending, to living a lie under a billionaire's roof. But one thing was clear, she couldn't back out now. The East Garden looked like something out of a dream. Marble paths wound between fountains and hedges sculpted into perfect spirals. At the center sat Liam, his dark suit sharp against the pale morning. He was reading a newspaper, but his attention shifted the moment she stepped closer. "You're punctual," he said without looking up. "I didn't know what time you expected me." "Exactly on time, then." His tone was neutral, but the corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but close. He folded the paper and gestured to the chair opposite. "We have an interview today. For the media." "Interview," she repeated. "Public image maintenance," he replied, pouring coffee into 2 cups. "You'll answer basic questions. How we met, how long we've been together, what you find admirable about me." Lydia's eyebrows lifted. "And what if I tell them the truth, that you're arrogant and impossible to talk to?" He glanced up, eyes glinting. "Then the world will think we're in love." She nearly choked on her coffee. "You really think lying solves everything, don't you?" "Not everything," he said. "Just what can't be fixed." For a moment, something in his voice softened, something that didn't match his polished armor. Lydia studied him quietly, wondering what wound he carried behind all that steel. Later that day, they sat side by side before a half-circle of reporters and flashing cameras. Lydia's pulse raced as questions came like bullets. "How did you two meet? Who confessed first? Are there wedding plans?" Liam answered with effortless charm. "We met at a charity event," he said smoothly. "She didn't care about my name, and I admired that." When the cameras turned to Lydia, she felt her throat tighten, but then she remembered the children at her clinic, the reason she was doing this. She smiled. "He's not as terrifying as he looks," she said, glancing at him. "Sometimes." Laughter rippled through the room. Even Liam's lips twitched. The tension broke, and for a moment, Lydia saw a version of him that wasn't all cold precision, a man who'd forgotten how to breathe easily. When the reporters left, Liam walked her to the car. The air between them felt lighter. "You handled that well," he said. "I learned from the best," she teased. He shot her a look, half amused, half warning. "Careful, Miss Hart. People who joke with me usually end up regretting it." "Then maybe you need better people," she replied. He stopped walking, and for a heartbeat, they just stared at each other, the air thick with something unsaid. "Get some rest," he said finally, his tone distant again. "Tomorrow's a long day." But as he turned away, Lydia caught a flicker of something behind his eyes. Not coldness, but weariness. The kind that didn't come from business, but from being alone too long. That night, she wandered through the mansion, drawn by the faint sound of piano music. It came from the West Hall, low, melancholic notes drifting like memories through the corridors. She found him there, Liam, seated at a grand piano, bathed in the silver light of the chandelier. His jacket was gone, his sleeves rolled up, his expression unguarded. The melody was soft, haunted. Lydia leaned against the doorframe, barely breathing. She'd never imagined he could create something so gentle. When the final note faded, he turned, startled to see her there. "I didn't mean to interrupt," she said quietly. He hesitated, then shook his head. You didn't. I didn't know you played. I don't. Not anymore. She stepped closer. Why stop? He looked down at his hands, long, precise fingers that had probably signed billion-dollar deals, now trembling faintly. My mother used to listen, he said. She died when I was 17. After that, music just felt loud. Lydia's chest tightened. I'm sorry. He gave a brief nod, as if that closed the subject. But it didn't. Not for her. Days passed. What began as a performance slowly became a rhythm. Breakfasts shared in quiet, public appearances side by side, small conversations that started awkward and ended too easily. Lydia noticed things about him she hadn't before. The way he tapped his thumb twice when deep in thought, the way his eyes softened when he looked at his grandfather's photo. And sometimes, when he thought she wasn't watching, he'd smile. Small, genuine, almost boyish. But there was another side to this world. Behind polished doors, whispers followed her, servants gossiping, relatives murmuring. Liam's sister, Cassandra, never missed a chance to remind her she didn't belong. Enjoy the spotlight while it lasts, Cassandra said one evening. My brother doesn't keep strays for long. Lydia ignored her, but the words left a sting. That night, Liam's grandfather asked to see her. The old man was frail, his hands trembling, but his eyes were sharp with humor. So you're the girl my grandson finally brought home, he said. Tell me, do you love him? Lydia froze. The question felt too heavy, too soon. He's complicated, she managed. The old man laughed weakly. That's just another word for lonely. He reached for her hand. Promise me something, Lydia. Don't let him lose himself to this family. Money can buy anything, except peace. Her throat tightened. I'll try, she whispered. When she stepped out, Liam was waiting in the hall. His expression was unreadable, but his voice was quiet. He likes you. He's wise, she said softly. And kind. Liam looked at her for a long moment, then said, almost to himself, he's the only person who ever saw me for who I am. Later that night, rain returned, gentle, constant, like a memory replaying itself. Lydia stood by the balcony again, thinking about the strange comfort she felt here now. The mansion no longer seemed as cold. Inside, Liam watched her from the hallway. He didn't understand why he cared, why her presence made the silence bearable. He'd built his life on logic, on control, on never needing anyone. But Lydia Hart, the woman who had stepped into his world through a lie, was teaching him something he'd forgotten: how to feel. It started with whispers. First among the mansion staff, murmurs Lydia couldn't quite catch as she passed. Then, from the tabloids that seemed to follow her every breath. The fairy tale lie was cracking, and the city was hungry for the truth. But inside the Crane estate, a different kind of storm was building. Liam had grown distant again. Their days still followed the same rhythm: public smiles, private silence, but the warmth between them had cooled. Lydia couldn't tell if it was something she'd done or something he was hiding. She tried to focus on her clinic, calling the nurses every night, trying to keep it alive through donations. But her heart was no longer steady. Each time she thought of leaving, something in Liam's gaze, a fleeting look of softness he didn't mean to show, held her back. Then, one night, she heard shouting. Int. Crane Estate. Grand Study. Night. The voice came from the west wing. Sharp. Furious. Lydia followed it, hesitating at the half-open door. Inside, Liam stood opposite a man she recognized from news reports. Victor Crane, his uncle and one of the company's top executives. You think this girl won't ruin everything? Victor snapped. She's a scandal waiting to happen. One wrong headline and the board will bury you. Liam's tone was steady, but dangerous. This discussion isn't about her. It's exactly about her, Victor spat. You're letting sentiment blind you. That woman doesn't belong here. She's a nobody, a charity case. Enough. Liam's voice cut like glass. Say one more word about her, and I'll remove you from the board myself. Victor stared at him, stunned, then laughed darkly. You sound just like your father, defending the wrong people until it destroys you. He stormed out, brushing past Lydia without noticing her. When Liam finally turned, she was already gone. Lydia didn't sleep that night. His words replayed in her mind. "You sound just like your father." She knew there was pain behind that sentence, but she didn't know why. The next morning, she asked one of the house staff, "Why does everyone avoid talking about Liam's father?" The maid hesitated, then whispered, "Mr. Crane's father took his own life when Liam was 19. The company was on the verge of collapse, and there were rumors of betrayal from within the family." Lydia's heart sank. Suddenly, Liam's walls made sense. The control, the coldness, the refusal to let anyone close. It wasn't arrogance. It was armor. That afternoon, she found him in the greenhouse, tending to a row of orchids. It was strange seeing him there, sleeves rolled up, hands carefully brushing away wilted petals. "You surprise me," she said quietly. "How so?" "Didn't take you for the gardening type." He didn't look up. "My mother planted these. I keep them alive for her." There was a silence, not awkward, but heavy with unspoken things. "She'd be proud," Lydia said softly. His hands paused. "No, she wouldn't. Not if she saw what I've become." Lydia frowned. "You're running a company that employs thousands. You take care of your family." "My family?" He let out a sharp laugh. "Half of them would sell me out for a seat at the boardroom table. You think I don't know what they say about me? That I'm heartless? Manipulative?" He finally looked up, his eyes burning. "Maybe they're right." Lydia stepped closer. "No. They're afraid of you because you don't break the way they do." He stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said, almost to himself, "You talk like someone who's seen too much loss." Her chest tightened. "We all have." He nodded slowly, as if he understood. And maybe, for the first time, he did. That night, the mansion held its breath. Rain hammered against the windows again, echoing the storm brewing within. Lydia couldn't sleep. She wandered into the library, needing space to think. But when she reached for a book, a voice came from the shadows. "Can't sleep either?" "Liam." He was sitting near the window, a glass of whiskey untouched beside him. She smiled faintly. "I don't think people like us ever really sleep." He motioned for her to sit. She hesitated, then joined him. Outside, lightning flashed, briefly illuminating their faces. "Tell me something true," he said suddenly. She turned to him, surprised. "What?" "Everything about us is a lie. Tell me something real." Lydia hesitated, then whispered, "When I was little, I used to believe that if you helped enough people, life would stop hurting. But it doesn't. It just hurts differently." He looked at her, something raw flickering in his eyes. "That's true." "Your turn," she said. He took a slow breath. "I don't know how to love without expecting to lose." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was understanding. For the first time, Lydia saw him not as a man made of steel and control, but as someone broken in the same way she was. But peace never lasts. The next morning, disaster arrived, not through storm or accident, but through betrayal. Lydia was on her way to the clinic when she saw the headline on the giant screen outside a newsstand. "Liam Crane's girlfriend exposed. Lydia Hart's charity tied to misused funds." Her stomach dropped. The article showed falsified receipts, false statements, all painting her as a fraud. By the time she returned to the mansion, reporters were camped outside the gates. Cameras flashed. Voices shouted questions that cut like knives. "Did you use Liam Crane's name for funding? Are you embezzling donations? Is this your idea of charity?" She pushed through, trembling, only to find Cassandra waiting at the top of the stairs, smirking. "Hard to keep lies straight, isn't it?" Cassandra purred. "You thought you could fool us, but the city loves a scandal." Lydia's vision blurred with fury. "You did this." "I don't dirty my hands with tabloids," Cassandra said sweetly. "But I do know a few editors who owe me favors." Before Lydia could respond, Liam's voice boomed from behind them. Enough! He strode in, eyes cold. Cass, leave. But she. Leave. Cassandra's smile faltered. She disappeared down the hall, heels clicking like gunshots. When they were alone, Lydia turned to him, voice trembling. You believe me, don't you? Liam didn't answer. His silence was worse than anger. She stepped closer, desperate. Liam, please. I don't know what to believe, he said quietly. You came into my life through a lie. How many more are there? The words hit her like a blow. Tears burned at the back of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You asked me to lie, she whispered. You built this illusion. I just tried to survive inside it. He looked away. Maybe we both got what we deserved. And with that, he left her standing in the grand hall, surrounded by silence that felt heavier than any storm. That night, Lydia packed her things. The lie had turned on her, and this time there was no saving it. As she stepped out of the mansion, the rain began again. Soft at first, then relentless. She didn't look back. The city didn't care about truth, only spectacle. By morning, Lydia's name was everywhere again. Television panels, gossip blogs, endless feeds spinning the same story. Country girl turns charity into scam. The words pulsed on every screen like a curse. But the cruelest silence came from Liam. He didn't call, didn't text, didn't defend her. For the first time in years, Lydia felt the kind of emptiness that no courage could carry her through. She'd survived humiliation before, but not like this. Not from someone she'd begun to believe in. Her apartment, once a haven, now felt smaller than ever. The locket on her chest was cold, like it blamed her for everything she'd lost. When her phone buzzed, she almost didn't answer. But it wasn't a reporter. It was a nurse from her clinic. Lydia, the woman said softly, a man came by today. Said he wanted to donate in your name. He left this envelope. Inside it, Lydia found a simple note. Keep doing what matters. LC. She stared at the initials for a long time. A part of her wanted to rip the paper apart. Another part wanted to cry. Because even after everything, he was still trying to fix things in the only way he knew, with money. But this wasn't about money anymore. Meanwhile, at the Crane estate, Liam sat in his office, surrounded by silence that pressed like guilt. The scandal had settled, temporarily, but it left a taste he couldn't wash away. He'd spent the morning reviewing security reports, tracing the leak. And that's when he saw it, an encrypted message forwarded from a private server under his sister's name. Cassandra. The article, the forged receipts, all of it had come from her. He leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. For a man who'd spent his life controlling everything, losing control of his family, of himself, was a wound he didn't know how to close. He'd told himself that distance protected him. That detachment was safety. But all it had done was turn him into the same cold ghost his father had become before the end. And Lydia, the woman who dared to look at him like he was still human, had paid the price for it. That evening, Liam went to his grandfather's room. The old man was sitting by the window, a blanket over his knees. He looked frilier now, but his eyes still burned with quiet intelligence. You let her go, his grandfather said. Liam froze. You heard. I didn't need to. I saw it in your face. He turned, voice thin but sharp. I asked you to bring me peace, Liam. Instead, you brought me pity. That girl, she carried light. You were too blind to see it. Liam's jaw tightened. She lied. So did you, the old man whispered. But hers was out of pain. Yours was out of pride. The words landed like stones. Do you know what I regret most, Liam? The old man continued. Spending my youth protecting an empire, and dying realizing I never built a home. He reached out, trembling, and placed a hand on his grandson's arm. Don't make the same mistake. Liam said nothing, but his chest ached like something inside had cracked open. 2 days later, Lydia received another call, this time from a hospital. The voice on the line was urgent. Miss Hart. This is St. Augustine Medical. Mr. Leonard Crane has requested you personally. Her heart stuttered. Liam's grandfather? Yes. He's asking for you by name. She hesitated for only a second before hailing a cab. When she arrived, the hallway smelled of antiseptic and grief. Liam was already there, standing outside the hospital room. His suit impeccable but his face undone, dark circles under his eyes, the sharpness in his features dulled by exhaustion. When their eyes met, neither spoke. For a long moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. You shouldn't be here, he said finally. Your grandfather asked for me, she replied quietly. He nodded once, stepping aside to let her in. Inside, the old man looked smaller than she remembered, a flicker of life wrapped in white sheets. But when he saw her, his face brightened. Ah, the girl who brings storms and silence, he rasped, smiling faintly. Come closer, Lydia. She knelt beside his bed, taking his fragile hand. I wanted to see you, he said. I needed to say thank you for reminding my grandson what it means to feel. Lydia's throat tightened. You don't need to thank me. I failed him. No, the old man whispered. He failed himself. But he'll find his way back. He looked toward Liam, who stood frozen in the doorway. If you love her, boy, tell her before you lose the chance. It was the last thing he ever said. Moments later, the monitors went flat. The funeral came 3 days later. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, and the city's elite arrived in black and silver. But amidst the sea of umbrellas and condolences, Lydia stood alone, unnoticed, uninvited, yet unable to stay away. She kept to the back, her hands clenched around the locket at her neck. When the ceremony ended, Liam approached. His usual composure was gone, replaced by something rawer, heavier. You shouldn't have come, he said softly. I needed to say goodbye, she replied. Rain began to fall again, gentle, persistent, washing through the garden where the ceremony was held. For a long moment, they stood in silence. Then Lydia said, He believed in you, you know. More than you believe in yourself. Liam's voice was low. He believed in both of us. She nodded, her heart aching. And what do you believe, Liam? He hesitated, then whispered, That I ruined the only thing that ever felt real. Her eyes filled, but she forced a smile. Then maybe it's time to start fixing what you can. She turned to leave, but before she could take another step, he caught her wrist. The touch was soft, desperate. I don't deserve forgiveness, he said. Maybe not, she whispered. But you can still earn it. And then she walked away, disappearing into the rain. That night, Liam stood alone in his grandfather's study. The air smelled of old books and fading memory. On the desk sat a single sealed letter addressed to him in the old man's handwriting. He opened it. Liam, the empire will stand without you. But your heart will not. If you find something worth holding on to, don't let pride be the reason you lose it. Build a home, not a legacy. Grandfather. Liam folded the letter slowly, staring out the window where rain streaked the glass. For the first time, he didn't think about the company or the headlines or the board. He thought about Lydia, about the way she had looked at him when the world turned against her and still saw something worth saving. And in that quiet, broken moment, Liam Crane made a decision. The next sunrise would not find him in this house. It would find him chasing the one thing he had finally learned to value more than power. The city woke to gray skies, the kind that seemed to hold its breath before rain. From the 32nd floor of his penthouse, Liam Crane stared out across the skyline he'd once ruled. Towers of glass caught the dull light, glittering like false promises. The empire was quieter without his grandfather. Investors sent their condolences through polite emails, the board sent flowers no one would remember, and the world moved on. That was the thing about loss in his world. It was only news for a day. But for Liam, time had stopped. The mansion felt wrong without the old man's voice echoing down its marble halls. The staff walked lighter now, speaking in whispers as though afraid to disturb a ghost. His grandfather's study remained locked, the air inside thick with the scent of cedar and dust. Liam couldn't bring himself to go back there yet. Every time he tried, His chest tightened like something was physically pressing against his ribs. Instead, he spent hours replaying memories in his mind. Lydia's laughter in the garden, her trembling defiance in the ballroom, the way her voice softened when she spoke to his grandfather. She'd brought color into the world he'd drained to grayscale. And he'd let her walk away into the rain. Days bled into nights without meaning. He attended meetings but didn't listen, signed papers without reading, smiled when he was supposed to. The world saw a man of control. Inside, he was unraveling. One evening, he found himself standing in the balcony garden where his grandfather used to sit every morning. The orchids his mother had once planted were blooming, fragile, white, impossibly alive despite the cold. He crouched beside them, brushing his fingers across a petal. "You're still here," he murmured. "You survived." For the first time in years, his voice cracked. The grief that came wasn't loud or violent. It was quiet, the kind that filled the spaces between heartbeats and made breathing feel like effort. He stayed there until the sky darkened and the city lights blinked to life one by one, thinking about the last thing his grandfather had said. "Build a home, not a legacy." The words echoed until they became unbearable. Liam straightened, turned back toward the mansion, and began packing. He didn't know where he was going yet, only that staying here meant drowning. Lydia, meanwhile, had thrown herself back into work at her clinic. The scandal had scarred her reputation, but not beyond repair. Donations had vanished, but the children kept coming. Every morning, she swept the clinic's narrow hallway, organized medicines, and smiled at faces that reminded her why she'd chosen this life. But behind the calm surface, she was exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally hollow. Her mother's locket rested heavier on her neck now. Sometimes, she'd catch herself touching it and whispering to the memory inside, "I did what I thought was right, Mom. But it still hurts." At night, she replayed the last moment she saw Liam, his face at the funeral, his voice breaking when he'd said, "I ruined the only thing that ever felt real." She told herself it was better this way. He belonged to another world, one made of marble and secrets. She belonged to this one, small, human, and full of ache. But the truth was harder. She missed him. A week passed before she saw him again. It was late afternoon, and rain had just begun to fall, the kind that came without thunder, gentle and endless. She was restocking bandages when a shadow appeared in the doorway. Her breath caught before she even looked up. He stood there, no bodyguards, no armor of arrogance, just a man in a rain-soaked suit, eyes that carried weeks of silence. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the rain tapping softly against the window. "Liam," she whispered, disbelieving. He looked around the clinic, the peeling paint, the flickering light, the faint scent of disinfectant. "You're still here." "This is my home," she said quietly. He nodded, as if that word, home, hit something deep in his chest. "I found out what really happened," he said. "The forged documents. The article. It was Cassandra. I shut her out of the company." Lydia didn't answer. She just kept looking at him, trying to decide if he was here out of guilt or something else. "I should have believed you," he continued. "But I didn't know how." She finally spoke, her voice calm but trembling. "You didn't want to know how. It's easier to doubt someone than to need them." He winced, the truth of it cutting sharper than anger ever could. "I came to say I'm sorry," he said. "And not just for the scandal. For everything. For using you, for doubting you, for not fighting for you when I should have." The words hung between them, raw and real. Lydia crossed her arms, staring at the floor. "You think apologies can fix everything?" "No," he said softly. "But maybe they can start something again." She looked up, and for the first time, his gaze wasn't cold. It was steady, vulnerable. The man who once believed he could buy his way out of pain now stood before her with nothing to offer but truth. That night, after the last patient left, she found him still there, helping the staff stack boxes, sleeves rolled up, rain drying in his hair. It was strange seeing him like this, out of place yet oddly natural. He caught her watching. "I don't remember the last time I did something that felt real," he said. Lydia's lips curved faintly. "Then you're welcome." He smiled, a small, tired human smile that made her heart stutter. They worked in silence until the lights dimmed. When they finally stepped outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets shining under the amber glow of the street lamps. He turned to her. "I've spent years running a company that builds things. Towers, contracts, profit margins. But none of it ever felt alive. This place," he gestured toward the clinic. "You built something that saves people. You built something I couldn't." "Everyone saves people differently," she said. "You just lost your way for a while." He nodded. "Maybe. But I want to find it again. If you'll let me." She hesitated. "And what about your empire?" He gave a small, almost amused laugh. "Empires survive without kings. Homes don't survive without love." The line was too honest, too unguarded. Lydia didn't know whether to cry or smile. They stood there for a long moment, the air damp with rain and memory. Finally, she said, "If you really mean that, then don't just say it. Show me." He took a step closer, not touching her, just close enough for her to feel the warmth of his breath. "I will," he whispered. "If you'll give me the chance." Her heart ached at the sincerity in his voice. The man who once controlled everything now asking for something as simple and terrifying as forgiveness. And for the first time since the night of the gala, Lydia let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, some lies could lead to truth, if both people were brave enough to face it. The next morning dawned soft and misty, the kind of morning that blurred the world in shades of silver. The city was quieter than usual, as if even it was holding its breath. Lydia arrived at the clinic early, expecting the usual hum of preparation, nurses setting up, patients waiting at the door, but instead, she found Liam already there. He was standing by the counter, a cup of coffee in his hand, talking to one of the volunteers. He looked different in the morning light. Not like the CEO who commanded boardrooms, but like a man who'd finally stepped out of a shadow. When he noticed her, a faint smile touched his lips. "I made coffee, though I think I burned it." She raised an eyebrow, amused. "You? Making coffee?" He shrugged. "There's a first time for everything." She tried to keep the moment light, but something inside her stirred. The quiet sincerity in his voice, the way he looked at her now, without pride, without defense, felt new. They spent the morning together, treating patients, arranging supplies, and sharing the kind of small talk that once would have been impossible. Liam asked questions, listened carefully, even knelt to comfort a frightened boy getting stitches. It was strange, watching him here. This man who'd lived his whole life behind polished walls now kneeling in a corner clinic, gently telling a child that bravery wasn't the absence of fear, but the choice to act anyway. When the last patient left, Lydia leaned against the counter, exhaustion painted across her face but warmth glowing in her eyes. "You're good with people," she said. He smiled faintly. "You make it sound surprising." "It is," she teased softly. Then, after a pause, "Why are you really here, Liam?" He hesitated, his gaze distant for a moment before meeting hers again. "Because I'm tired of living for things that don't matter. My whole life has been about control, running from chaos, avoiding loss. But it didn't stop anything. My father still died, my family still fell apart, and the only person who made me feel alive walked out into the rain because I was too proud to stop her." Her throat tightened. "You can't rewrite the past." "No," he said. "But maybe I can learn from it." A week later, Lydia found him sitting in the clinic's small office surrounded by medical files. "What are you doing?" she asked, stepping closer. "Trying to understand you," he said, glancing up. "You're not just a doctor. The way you diagnose, the way you talk to patients, it's instinctive, but it's also methodical. Like someone who's done research, serious research." Her pulse quickened. "I've had some training." "Training?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "Lydia, I had one of my contacts look into your old records. You're registered under another name at the International Medical Research Foundation. Dr. Rowan Hart." The room went silent. Lydia froze, her heart pounding. "You looked into me?" "I had to," he said softly. "Not because I didn't trust you, but because I needed to know who you really are." She looked down, hands trembling slightly. Dr. Rowan was supposed to stay anonymous. It wasn't about recognition. It was about saving lives. He stood. "Why hide it?" "Because no one believed in me when I started," she whispered. "A young woman from nowhere, without money or connections. They laughed when I proposed a rural research project. So I worked under a pseudonym. Every paper, every patent, every test, all of it under a name that couldn't be mocked." She finally looked up at him, tears glistening. "My mother taught me medicine in our little clinic. She believed healing was sacred. When she died, I promised I'd make her proud, not by being famous, but by being useful." Liam was silent, his chest tightening. The woman he'd once dismissed as an impulsive girl had built an entire legacy of quiet miracles, and never claimed credit. "I didn't want anyone to know," she continued. "Not even you. Because you would have treated me differently." He shook his head slowly. "I would have treated you the same, maybe worse. Because I was too afraid to see anyone as my equal." For a long time, neither spoke. The air between them shimmered with everything they'd hidden, everything they'd misunderstood. That night, they walked together to the rooftop terrace above the clinic, the same one Lydia used to stand on when the noise of the world became too loud. The city stretched around them, lights flickering like stars that refused to fade. "Do you ever think about going back?" Liam asked. "Back where?" "To your research. The global councils, the grants. You could be leading teams, changing medicine." She smiled faintly. "And who would run the clinic?" "Someone else." She shook her head. "Someone else doesn't know the names of the children who come here. Someone else doesn't understand why little Ada can't sleep through the night or why Jacob hides his drawings in the supply closet. I don't want to save the world, Liam. I just want to heal the part one can reach." He looked at her with quiet awe. "You're remarkable." Lydia's eyes met his. "You're learning to see." The next day, Liam returned to the Crane Corporation headquarters for the first time in weeks. His boardroom felt colder, emptier. Cassandra's chair sat vacant, stripped of nameplates. He took a deep breath and said what no one expected. "I'm stepping down as CEO." The room erupted, protests, disbelief, outrage. He raised a hand. "I'm not abandoning the company. I'm building something new, a healthcare division in my grandfather's name, focused on rural outreach. Lydia Hart will lead it." The murmurs grew louder. "A clinic doctor," one executive scoffed. Liam's voice dropped, quiet but firm. "A doctor who saved more lives in silence than all of us in suits combined." When the meeting ended, he walked out into the sunlight feeling lighter than he had in years. That evening, he returned to the clinic carrying a stack of papers. Lydia looked up from her desk as he entered. "What's this?" she asked. "A proposal," he said, setting the folder down. "A joint initiative, Crane Foundation and Hart Medical Outreach. Equal partners." She opened it, scanning the details, her brows furrowing. "You want to expand my clinic into a network?" "Our clinic," he corrected gently. "If you'll let me help." Her fingers brushed the page, tracing the signatures, the plans, the possibilities. Then she looked up, eyes soft. "Why are you doing this, Liam?" He smiled faintly. "Because you were right. It's easier to doubt someone than to need them. And I need you, not just in my life, but beside me, helping me build something that matters." Lydia blinked back tears, trying to speak, but all she managed was a whisper. "You really mean that?" "I've never meant anything more." He reached for her hand, not as a contract, not as repayment, but as something simple, human, and real. For the first time, she didn't pull away. That night, as they stood outside the clinic watching the city lights flicker, Liam turned to her. "You said once that you lie to survive. I used to control everything to survive. Maybe survival isn't enough anymore." She smiled softly. "No. But love is." And for the first time, he didn't run from it. The following month arrived with the scent of new beginnings. The once faded clinic on Cedar Street now hummed with activity. Fresh paint on the walls, new equipment gleaming in the sunlight, laughter spilling from rooms that once echoed with silence. The Crane Heart Medical Outreach had officially opened. Lydia stood in the doorway, clipboard in hand, still not used to the sight, her name etched in brass beside Liam's on the entrance plaque. It didn't feel like pride. It felt like peace. Liam approached from behind, his sleeves rolled, his usual precision softened by a quiet ease that came only with purpose. "Grand opening day," he said. "How do you feel?" She smiled. "Like I'm standing inside a dream I never dared to have." He chuckled. "You built it. You deserve it." Lydia looked at him then, really looked, and realized how much he'd changed. The rigid lines of ambition had softened into something human. The man who once measured life in profit now measured it in impact. The opening ceremony drew an unexpected crowd. Journalists, philanthropists, local families, even the mayor. Cameras flashed, but Lydia barely noticed. Her focus was on the children, the same faces that reminded her why she started all this. One little girl tugged her sleeve. "Dr. Lydia, is that your husband?" Lydia blinked, caught off guard, then glanced toward Liam, who was across the courtyard helping an elderly woman out of a wheelchair. "No," she said softly, though her heart whispered something else. "He's my partner." The girl smiled knowingly. "He looks at you like my dad looks at my mom." Lydia's laugh was quiet but full of something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Later that day, after the ribbon cutting, Liam found her alone in the garden behind the clinic. She was kneeling beside a row of white lilies, fingers brushing the petals with care. "These were my mother's favorite," she said. "She said lilies bloom after storms." He crouched beside her. "Then they're the perfect symbol for today." She looked up at him. "Liam, why did you really do all this?" "The clinic, the foundation. It's more than philanthropy. It feels personal." He hesitated before answering. "Because I spent most of my life building walls. My grandfather taught me how to lead, but not how to live. You did both, without money, without help, just heart. I wanted to be part of something that mattered. And I wanted to matter to you." Her breath caught, the world narrowing to the space between them. "Liam," she began, but he shook his head gently. "I don't expect anything. I just needed you to know." For a long moment, the only sound was the wind moving through the flowers. Then Lydia reached into her coat pocket and handed him a small, worn envelope. He frowned. "What's this?" "My mother's last letter. I've never shown it to anyone." He opened it carefully. The handwriting was elegant but faint, the ink smudged by time. "My dearest Lydia, if you ever feel lost, remember, love is not found in the grand things, but in the quiet acts that outlive us. Heal, even when it hurts. Give, even when you're empty. And when someone finally sees you for who you are, don't hide, let them in." Liam folded the letter slowly, his throat tightening. "She sounds like you." "She was stronger," Lydia said. He shook his head. "No. She just lived long enough to pass you the torch." That evening, as twilight descended, the foundation hosted a dinner for donors and families. Lydia found herself standing near the balcony, watching the city shimmer under the stars. She could still hear the laughter inside, the clinking of glasses, the hum of celebration. But her thoughts were far away, back to that first night in the ballroom, when she'd said Liam's name out of defiance, never imagining it would rewrite both their lives. Now, that same name meant something entirely different. She smiled faintly, whispering to the wind, "You turned my lie into truth." Behind her, Liam approached quietly. "Talking to the city again?" She turned, startled, then laughed softly. "Maybe." He stepped beside her, hands resting on the railing. "I was thinking, maybe we've both been talking to ghosts for too long." She tilted her head. "Meaning?" He met her gaze, steady, clear, stripped of every mask. "Meaning it's time to start living." The night deepened. Music floated through the open doors, a slow, haunting melody played by a string quartet. Liam held out a hand. "Dance with me," he said. Lydia hesitated, glancing toward the guests. "Here." Here, he repeated, with that soft conviction she'd come to trust. She placed her hand in his. His other hand found her waist, gentle yet grounding, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel the need to keep her guard up. They moved slowly, the city lights casting silver across their faces. The world around them faded. No cameras, no boardrooms, no whispers of status or class. Just two souls finding rhythm in the quiet between heartbeats. You know, he murmured, if someone told me months ago that a woman would walk into my life and undo everything I thought I knew. She smiled up at him. You would have fired them? He chuckled. Immediately. Their laughter mingled with the music. Light, effortless, alive. As the song faded, Liam stopped, his hand still holding hers. Lydia, there's something I want to ask. Her heart skipped. Liam. Not what you think, he said with a soft smile. Not yet. But soon. I just need to know one thing. She waited. After everything, the lies, the chaos, the past, do you still believe love can last? Lydia took a breath, eyes glistening under the golden light. Love doesn't need to last forever to matter, Liam. But the kind that heals, the kind that changes us, it always does. He nodded slowly, her words sinking deep into places he'd long kept closed. Then, without ceremony, he whispered, Then let's heal together. And in that quiet, under the hum of the city and the echo of distant applause, Lydia leaned forward and kissed him, not out of defiance this time, but surrender. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his chest. Do you realize this started because I was trying to save face? He laughed quietly. And ended because we both finally found it. They stood there for a long while, wrapped in silence that no longer hurt. From the street below, the clinic's new sign flickered in the dark, Crane Heart Medical Outreach, Healing with Heart. It was more than a name. It was a promise. In a world obsessed with power, they found something rarer, grace. In a city built on illusion, they built something real. And though their story began with a lie told in desperation, it ended in a truth neither of them could deny, that sometimes the heart's greatest mistake is the path to its redemption. A year later, the city had changed. Or maybe it was them. Morning sunlight streamed through the wide glass windows of the Crane Heart Foundation headquarters, a building that once stood as a monument to power, now transformed into a sanctuary of healing. Children's laughter echoed through the halls. Nurses moved briskly between departments, and volunteers filled the courtyard with bright energy. Lydia walked through the glass doors, her white coat fluttering behind her like a flag of quiet victory. The receptionist smiled as she passed. Morning, Dr. Hart. Lydia smiled back. Morning, Sam. Her footsteps slowed when she reached the hallway lined with photographs, snapshots of their journey. There was the day of the opening, the rural camps they'd launched, the first successful surgery under the new program. And there, at the center of it all, a framed photo of her and Liam, standing side by side, hands covered in paint, smiling as they signed the first wall of the Foundation's clinic. Beneath the photo, engraved in brass, Healing with Heart. Outside, the sky was clear and endless, washed in the color of peace. She stepped into the garden, her favorite part of the Foundation, where lilies bloomed in soft white rows. The air smelled like memory and new beginnings. She crouched to touch one bloom, her mind drifting back to that night a year ago, the gala, the laughter, the humiliation, the lie that had changed her life. I said your name out of pride, she murmured, half to herself. But it gave me purpose. Behind her, footsteps approached, slow, familiar. Liam's voice carried through the breeze. Talking to ghosts again? Lydia turned, smiling. Just to the version of myself who didn't know what love looked like. He came closer, his suit crisp yet unassuming, sleeves rolled, tie loosened, a man at peace in his own skin. And what does it look like now? She looked at him, sunlight catching in her eyes. Like this. They walked together down the garden path, the hum of the city faint beyond the gates. It felt like walking inside a memory, or maybe a promise kept. Do you ever think about that night? Liam asked. All the time, she said. The rain. The laughter. The way everyone stared after I said your name. He smiled faintly. You could have chosen anyone in that room. I didn't choose, she said. I just needed someone to believe me. And you picked me, he said, amusement softening his voice. Lydia laughed. Maybe I was testing fate. He stopped, turning to face her. And do you think fate passed the test? She pretended to consider it, then nodded. Barely. He laughed, the sound low and genuine, the kind of laugh that comes from someone who has survived himself. They reached the edge of the garden, where a small crowd of children were waiting, part of the outreach program's morning class. When the kids spotted Lydia, they ran toward her, shouting greetings. Lydia crouched to meet them, her voice warm and patient as she handed out small notebooks and stethoscopes. Liam watched her quietly, his heart full in a way he'd never known before. It wasn't the grand gestures or perfect words that bound them now. It was the small, real things. Shared mornings, laughter after long days, the quiet knowledge that they'd both been broken once and chose to heal instead of harden. One of the children, a boy with wide, curious eyes, tugged at Liam's sleeve. Sir, the boy said shyly, Dr. Lydia said you used to be a big boss. Why'd you stop? Liam crouched, smiling. Because I realized I was running a company that built buildings, but not lives. Now I get to do both. The boy nodded solemnly. You must really like her. Liam chuckled. You have no idea. The child giggled and ran off, leaving Liam standing there with a faint smile, watching Lydia from across the garden. Later that evening, when the day's work ended, they walked to the rooftop. The city below glowed in warm gold, a sea of light stretching to the horizon. This view never gets old, Lydia said softly. Liam leaned against the railing. You know, when I first met you, I thought you were chaos personified. She smiled. And you were arrogance in a suit. Fair, he admitted. But maybe that's why it worked. You reminded me that control isn't strength, it's fear. And you reminded me that independence doesn't mean isolation, she said. He looked at her, his expression turning thoughtful. Do you ever regret that night? She turned to him, eyes reflecting the city lights. Not even a little. Because for once, a lie led to something true. Liam nodded slowly. Then maybe that's what love really is, the one beautiful thing that survives our mistakes. For a long time, neither spoke. The wind carried the scent of lilies up from the garden below. Finally, Lydia broke the silence. Do you remember the first time I kissed you? He smiled. Hard to forget. You looked like you were ready to fight the world. I was, she said. And somehow, the world turned into you. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. So, was it worth it? The risk, the lie, the pain. Lydia's smile deepened. Every second. She leaned in and kissed him, not out of desperation this time, not to prove anything, but simply because love had found its place. The city lights blurred into soft halos behind them. The same rain that had once humiliated her now began to fall. Gentle, cleansing, familiar. Lydia laughed against his lips. Full circle, she whispered. He nodded, pulling her close. Full circle. They stayed there, rain soaking their clothes, hearts steady and unhurried. The city below pulsed with life, and for once, both of them belonged to it. Not as broken pieces trying to survive, but as two souls who had built something whole together. Once, she lied to protect her pride. He pretended to protect his image. But love doesn't start with perfection. It starts with truth. And sometimes, it takes one impulsive kiss to remind the heart what it's been missing all along. Rain falls. The city glows. Two hearts beat in rhythm, not in defiance, but in peace. Would you have done what Lydia did? Tell us where you're watching from, and if this story moved you, share it with someone who still believes in second chances. Because sometimes, love begins where pride ends.